Let's get this going. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to hear another one of our webinars. This is just one in a series of webinars that we've host since COVID has started. We normally mix a technical subject or an interest topic with a general market update, and we do it in both Hebrew and in English. Today we're going to be talking about living wills, and my guest is Tanya Kuchar. Tanya Kuchar is an advocate, and she's founded TK Law. She was born in South Africa, made Aliyah as a kid, graduated from law and business from Bar-Ilan University in 2002. She started her legal career in Maytal, one of Israel's leading law firms. And after a stint in New York, Tanya started her own practice in Renana. Tanya specializes in real estate transactions with a focus on new immigrants and foreign residents. Tanya assists her clients in drafting wills based on Israeli law and specializes in probate of foreign wills and the administration of estates of deceased foreign residents. So she understands how to deal with immigrants and Israeli law. Tanya is qualified as a notary and is also certified to prepare the continuous power of attorney, which is the subject of today's webinar. Tanya is a medic and a first responder volunteering with Hatzolah, and she runs the Renana United Hatzolah Emergency Response Team. So we hope her beeper doesn't go off during this session. Tanya also serves pro bono on a number of charities. Before we begin in detail, I just want you, if there's any questions, you can type them into the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll look out for them. This is being broadcast on Facebook Live, and recording will be available on our Pioneers YouTube channel. Okay, Tanya, over to you. What is a continuing power of attorney and why is it important?
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you to Pioneer for inviting me to talk about this very important topic. I will share my screen so you can see the presentation. 1 second. Okay, I hope you can all see the presentation. So today we will be talking about, as Mike said, continuous power of attorney, what it is and why you need it. Okay, I'll discuss what a continuous power of attorney is, also known as a living will, why it's necessary, what the legal status was in Israel before 2017, how it works, what should you include, and how do you actually sign a continuous power of attorney here in Israel. Most people in their lifetime will write a will. People get older, they want to know that their finances are taken care of, that their children and their grandchildren will get their assets in the way that they want them distributed. In fact, some people will say that a will is the biggest transaction a person will ever make. Statistically speaking today, the lifespan of humans is getting longer and longer. There's over 900,000 people in Israel above the age of 65. And with advances in medicine, people are living longer and longer, but that doesn't always mean that they can take care of their own affairs. There's more and more cases of Alzheimer's, dementia, and other cognitive deterioration that are found among the elderly. And as I said before, people tend to plan for their death, but they don't always plan for this part of their life. So let me start with a little story, actually about my late grandmother. She had a series of strokes towards the end of her life, and she was unable to make decisions for herself. She was also unable to communicate much. But it was very, very clear when she spent time with her great-grandchildren how she had a spark in her eye and she was always happy to see them. And when we took her out for a cup of coffee to her favorite coffee shop, even though she wasn't able to order exactly what she wanted to order, when her cappuccino arrived with skim milk and weak and with a lot of foam, which is exactly the way she liked her coffee, she was always delighted. So even though people can have cognitive deterioration, it doesn't mean that they can't enjoy their quality of life. And this is why it's so important, and this is why we're discussing today the idea of having a continuous power of attorney or living will. So I'm going to go back to the legal status in Israel prior to the change in the law, which happened in 2016 and took effect in 2017. If a person was unable to run their affairs or understands matter concerning their health, well-being or wealth, one would have to apply to the court to appoint a guardian on their behalf. The process is tiresome for the guardian, who has to file constant reports to the court, form separate bank accounts, monitor all expenses, and receive court permission for every action that they want to do on behalf of the person who they're appointed for. And the person appointed wasn't necessarily the person who you would want to appoint if you had the choice, and the decisions they make are not necessarily your decisions. The amendment to the law came in 2016, and it was a result of a few different movements worldwide, such as the Hague Conventions, basic human rights legislation, equality legislation regarding people with disabilities, etc. And the idea behind the amendment was to really take into consideration a person's wishes regarding their own affairs. Who will take care of such affairs? How this will work? What will be done? And this is a really important tool for future planning. So the continuous power of attorney covers 3 separate areas: personal, financial, and medical. And I'll briefly discuss each category, give you a few examples and stories. And at the end, we'll talk about the process of how you sign. So we'll start with the personal side. So most inquiries that I receive about continuous power of attorneys, they start like this. We'll call my client Anne. Anne will come to my office for a first meeting about power of attorney, and she'll come with her 2 daughters. And Anne tells me that she just wants to sign over all the rights, personal, medical, financial, to her 2 daughters. She doesn't want to leave any instructions whatsoever. They know what she likes. They know what to do. So I ask her if her daughters live at home, and she tells me no. You know, the one moved out 15 years ago, the one moved out 10 years ago. Okay. So I ask her a lot of questions about her lifestyle. We get talking. She opens up a little. And at some point, she tells me that when she goes to sleep at night, she likes to open her bedroom door. Interesting. Her daughter looks at her and says, "Mom, you open your bedroom door at night? You always sleep with your door closed." So she turns to her daughter and she tells her that since her husband passed away, when she opens her door at night, she feels more secure, more safe. Now try and imagine this lady, Anne, at a much older age with dementia. She's at home with a caregiver or in a nursing care facility, and she's upset at night and agitated, and no one knows why. And a simple instruction in a power of attorney saying something so simple like "leave my door open at night" would have changed her evenings, her nights for her. It really would have given her back her control into her life. So when discussing your personal needs, you can really put as many and as little details as you want into this document. You can talk about things like personal hygiene, how many times a day you want to shower, what kind of food you want, how do you like your steak, medium rare, well done, what wine you like to drink, what music you want to listen to, what cultural events you would like to be taken to. And it's also very important to discuss the bigger things, like where you would like to live. Do you want to stay at home with a caregiver? If so, who should the caregiver be? What kind of a person? Or would you like to be at an assisted living facility, an old age home, a nursing care? Which place is your preference, of course? Do you want cameras in your house so that your children can make sure you're getting the best treatment possible? This document is not a document that is signed in one meeting. Usually my clients come, and after this first meeting, when they say they don't want to put any instructions in, and we talk about all the things that could be in, and the instructions they can leave in this power of attorney, they go home and they do their homework, and they come back to the next meeting and they pour out their heart of all the personal instructions to whoever they're leaving power of attorney. Another important thing to put in, and I'll explain why later, family events and gifts. Do you want to attend family events? Would this be part of maintaining your good quality of life? Do you want to go to your grandson's bar mitzvahs, your great-grandchildren's weddings, etc., etc.? You might not remember that you were there. You might not be able to tell about the event, but when you're at an event, when you're part of a family, you can still enjoy quality of life. And this is the point of this change in law. And I am moving on to the financial side. So when you sign the financial, when you talk about the financial part of the continuous power of attorney, I see this as a perfect opportunity to get all your affairs in order. I make my clients do their homework at home and come back with a list of all their assets, their insurance policies, their investments, their funds, their real estate properties, the place they live, or a full list of investments, a full list of policies, and who takes care of each thing. Because you want to make sure that whoever's taking care of your financials is someone who knows how to take care of it, knows where your assets are, how to locate them, bank accounts, where they're located, what are your account numbers, etc., etc. While the personal part of the power of attorney might have discussed, as I said earlier, where you would like to live, assisted care, nursing care, or at home, in the financial part, this would be the time to discuss how you want to pay for this. If you need to sell a property, which property do you want to sell? If you need to sell investments or change the type of investments, who should the person dealing with your finances, who should they take advice from? Who should they get advice? What should they sell first in what priority? What happens if you can't afford some of your wishes? While the personal section, again, talks about, we discussed going to family events, etc. So in the financial section, we can talk about gifts for family. Now, the court still has some checks and balances when it comes to this important document, and loans and gifts up to the amount of 100,000 shekels have to have specific approval in your power of attorney. You can't just leave this up to the person you're appointing. And anything over 100,000 shekels, in addition to anything, any real estate asset that you want to sell, has to get court approval. Now, when you come to the court and ask for approval to sell an asset in order to pay for, a move to a different facility or etc., the court obviously is more inclined to accept the request if this is something that you've put in your power of attorney. I will tell you another story now. Recently, a client came to me and told me as follows. She would like a power of attorney for her husband. Her husband has 24-hour nursing care. He's unable to make decisions at the moment for himself. Up till now, she was able to prompt him when she needed to speak to banks or speak to their investment advisors. But now it's getting more and more difficult. She would like to retire. She's reached retirement age and she would like to retire. But the investments are all in his name. And currently the investments don't give her a monthly income. And she needs to make some changes in order for her to be able to retire. Now, when I heard her story, it was clear to me that her husband is not able to sign a power of attorney. Unfortunately, you have to be cognitive, you have to have good, understand the meaning of the power of attorney, the meaning of the document that you're signing. And he wasn't able to do that. So for this client, the only option was to turn to the court and ask her to be appointed as his guardian. Something that is tiresome. You have to bring a detailed and expensive, I should say, medical opinion. And once she received it, it took time, and once she received it, any change in investments needs court approval. All these things need to go through the court and need to be approved. So if she or her husband had signed power of attorney when he was still able to, she would be able to retire exactly the way she wanted and keep control of their financial affairs. The financial part of the power of attorney, interesting fact, can take effect on any date that you wish, meaning there's a trigger clause in this continuous power of attorney, which, if not changed, is based on medical opinion that you don't understand the contents of the document. However, the financial part can take effect whenever you want. In fact, it can take effect immediately and be used like a regular power of attorney. And since the COVID pandemic started, more and more people ask for the financial part to take effect. This does not take away your ability to give instructions. However, it allows your children, for example, to go to the bank on your behalf and use this power of attorney to deal with your finances on your behalf when you don't want to leave the house. Now, why do I say in theory? This is all in theory, because the banks are have not quite decided how to deal with this document. They don't always accept the full capacity of this document. And there's a lot of legal battles going on between the court, the legal departments of the banks, and the guardianship office. I believe that in time, the more popular this becomes, they will find a straight line, the banks will start accepting this more and more. However, it's not always 100% at this point. People often ask me if having a joint account allow a joint bank account, if that's their main asset, if that's okay, do they still need a power of attorney? And I go back to saying the banks are often the problem here. So when you have a joint account, if the bank hears that the person, one of the people, one of the partners on the account is not in capacity to make decisions, immediately the status of the account slightly changes. You can't make any, you can't do any business from that account except for the normal course of business, meaning you'll continue to pay your accounts. But if you decide to liquidate the entire account and move it to your own personal account, the bank will not allow this. Similar, actually, if one of the partners of a joint account pass away. If the partners of the joint account signed what's called a longevity clause, it's a clause, in Hebrew it's called arichut yamim. It's a clause that allows you to continue using the bank account, normal course of business. If they have that, then after one partner is deceased, no problem, you can continue to use the bank account. Again, nothing out of the ordinary until there's a writ of inheritance. But if you don't have that clause, immediately after one of the partners is deceased, the bank account gets frozen and it waits for probate. And we are moving on to the medical side. The medical part of the power of attorney is probably the most difficult section for most people to fill in. It's hard enough when you're signing this document and you're healthy and you're well to wrap your head around, you know, a situation when you're not able to make decisions for yourself, but also to make medical decisions now for yourself. You know, it's very difficult to think of all the scenarios, what you want to put in there. However, if any of you ever in your past have had to make a decision for a parent or grandparent, like, should I give more morphine? Should I put my parent on a feeding tube or not? These decisions haunt you for life. No matter what decision you make, you always wonder, did I make them suffer? Should I have tried harder to prolong their life? And you never know, there's never a right answer. But when you're leaving a power of attorney for your children, when you leave instructions regarding the way you want your medical to be managed, it makes it so much easier for the children to actually make these decisions, because they know that when they're making the decisions, they're deciding based on what you would have wanted, which again, this was the point of the law, the point of the change. Instructions in the medical part of the power of attorney can include what type of treatment you would want. Would you want surgery, invasive treatment, non-invasive treatment? What happens if you're diagnosed with another illness like cancer? Would you want chemotherapy, radiotherapy, etc., etc.? The medical part of the continuous power of attorney does not replace the power of attorney that you sign if, God forbid, you're diagnosed with an illness which gives you prognosis of 6 months to live. That is a separate document whatsoever, which is not in discussion here. Which goes to Misrad Abriut. This is not relevant for this document. This document talks about, again, if you're incapacitated, if you're unable to make decisions for yourself for whatever reason, how you would like your power of attorney to make these medical decisions for you. Since we started with COVID, often I find an instruction that people put in, I don't want to be on any artificial breathing machines. And since we started with COVID, I always ask people, what happens if you get COVID? Then do you want to be artificially ventilated? In that case, this is a life-saving part of medical technology to treat COVID. Would you want it? And interesting enough, the answers vary. It's not always straightforward. I will give you another story. So a client came to my office, and when we were discussing the medical part of the power of attorney, they told me that they have ALS, and they're in the process of getting approved out of Israel for assisted suicide. This guy felt that if things get bad, he would want to be able to end his life the way he would want. And he wanted me to add to his power of attorney on the medical section that whoever he's appointing would sign any documents required. And of course, this wasn't, I could not do this, since you cannot add anything in the power of attorney that is illegal in Israel. You can't ask for euthanasia, you can't ask for assisted suicide. I think I missed one point here, so I'm going to go back to the trigger clause in the power of attorney. The default by law is that the power of attorney takes effect by an expert opinion, that you're unable to understand the instructions that you've given in your power of attorney, but really you can give any trigger clause that you want. You can appoint a doctor that you want. Whatever you decide, this is part of this document, that you have control to decide when you want it to take effect, how you want it to take effect. Okay, so how long does it take? You're probably wondering. What's the process, and how do we do it? So it takes at least 2 meetings with a lawyer that is certified to set up this type of power of attorney. It's a specific certification required. You have to have at least one of those meetings alone without the person that you're appointing. It's the lawyer's job to make sure that A, you understand the document that you're signing, and B, you're not signing under any duress. No one's forcing you to appoint them. No one's putting any pressure on you to appoint them. Since September, the regulations have been updated that if you're over 65 or at high risk for COVID-19, then you can sign via video conferencing. There are very specific terms of how it works, including that after you've signed the document all over video conferencing, the lawyer has to randomly, before submitting the document, pick up the phone and call you and make sure that you still remember what you signed, the contents of what you signed, and who you appointed. It's really the lawyer's job to make sure that you understand what you're signing and that you're in the mental capacity and ability to sign this document. And if the lawyer is not sure that you understand, then the best is to bring in a medical expert, a medical opinion, saying that you are capable of understanding and you know what you're signing. This way, no one can contest your appointment of the power of attorney in the future. If you're appointed by someone to be their power of attorney, obviously you also have to sign. You also have to be explained by a lawyer, any lawyer in this case, not only a certified lawyer, any Israeli certified lawyer, but you don't have to be certified for purposes of the continuous power of attorney. You also have to sign. So you could also sign overseas, most probably. I say most probably because an opinion came out from the Israeli Bar Association. People that were appointed were trying to sign these documents at the consulate out of Israel, and the consulate refused to approve signatures on these documents. So a qualified Israeli lawyer out of Israel is okay for you to sign in front of. If you're a foreign resident with assets in Israel, you can also sign a continuous power of attorney in Israel in front of a certified Israeli lawyer. However, since you're a foreign resident, the law that applies to you at the moment is not Israeli law. I say at the moment because there is an idea or movement to try and change this. But in order to submit your power of attorney, you also required to bring a legal opinion regarding the country where you are a resident, that it's legal, that the laws are similar to Israel, and that what you're doing is okay. Once the power of attorney is signed by all the parties, the lawyer that you signed in front of submits the power of attorney to the General Guardian's office after signing it digitally, after confirming that all the requirements by law were met. And once it's approved by that office, it stays dormant until activated or until needed, and hopefully never. So really, to sum up, I hope that I've emphasized the importance of this document and how it can affect every part of your life in the future. And it really is an important change to the law, an important document to sign. And that's it, Mike.
Great, thank you, Tanya. We got a couple of questions. We got a couple of questions before. I think let's deal with the questions on you before we deal with my section. Question number one: can the POA be divided per section, or is it only one? Or is it only one document per person?
Okay.
I'm not sure.
So yes, it can be divided. Each section you can appoint a different person. In fact, it's best to appoint more than one person per section. Now, when you appoint more than one person, there's two options. You can appoint one as an alternative for the other, meaning if the person you appoint isn't able to represent you for whatever reason, and there are reasons under law, then the next person will be the person in line. Or you can say that, you know, the two people need to make decisions together. If there's three people, a majority vote, you can determine how you want your affairs run.
Do they have to be renewed periodically, or do they expire in any way once they're established?
They don't expire until they're affected, and afterwards, for whatever reason, you know, cancelled, and there are reasons for them to be cancelled. But once you've signed them, they do not expire. I do recommend my clients, and you also get reminders from the Guardian office, to review these once every 3 years, once every 5 years. Things change in your life, relationships change, your assets change, and it is good to update a document like this once every few years.
What is the average cost of setting up such an arrangement for a couple or a person?
Okay, so this is a difficult answer. There's no set cost by law. It ranges from, depending on how many meetings you have, of course, with the person, where the meetings are, in your office, out the office. It ranges from 3,000 shekels to, I've seen offices that charge $10,000 for a couple power of attorney.
So the answer to that one is it depends on the complexity and the time involved.
Correct.
Then a very important question, actually, can you do it in English? I've seen these documents and they're quite intimidating in Hebrew. Can you do it in English?
Okay, so there's a basic form which needs to be filled out, and that is in Hebrew, although there is an English translation to understand it. But along with the form, which is just the basic who you're appointing for each category and what the trigger event is, there's also what's called the instructions that you give along with the form. All the things that I talked about earlier are separate instructions, and those can be done in English. Those I've done in English plenty times, and they are accepted.
So it becomes Hebraish.
The Guardian office, after it's digitally submitted to them, they approve it, they read it, they check it, they make sure that you've answered all the technical specifications of it, and it has been approved in English multiple times.
I think what people fail to realize from my experience is just how official this is. I've been appointed, at least on the financial side, by a number of clients, and it's very official. It's via the court, and there's SMSs going back and forth, and it's just an incredibly officious process. Right. A very important question here: can the appointed person be a non-Israeli person, someone living abroad, like, for example, children abroad?
Absolutely. You can appoint someone abroad. As I said, you can sign abroad in front of any Israeli qualified lawyer abroad. Right now, again, it's not certain if this will be held, if this will be a technical thing that will be withheld or not. But according to the Bar Association, it's best to sign at the consulate in front of a lawyer, meaning not in front of the consul, but at the consulate, because that's considered Israeli jurisdiction. Not sure that's going to be withheld, Mike. But with that said, I'm not convinced that it's the right thing to appoint someone abroad. When you appoint it, especially on the financial side, but even medical or personal, actually on all three sides, you need the person to be hands-on. You need someone who's actually going to be taking care of you. And if they live abroad, I'm not sure this is the practical thing to do. There's an option to add to your document someone to be in the know, someone that has to be notified when the power of attorney takes effect, and when certain things are done on any of the aspects, and you could appoint the person abroad just to be in the know, kind of a checks and balance thing.
So if you don't have children here, it's advisable you have someone here who works with the children abroad on the issues raised. Right. We're running out of time here, so I just want a couple other questions. Can this document apply to foreign assets? For example, if you've got a Swiss bank account, can you use the living will certified in? Obviously, has to be translated, but can you present that to the Swiss bank and have it applied?
Complex question, which is not straightforward. I'll answer the question in reverse about Israeli law, and recently there's been two precedents from the court, one from Tiberias and one from Tel Aviv, where living wills signed, one in England and one in Florida, according to the laws in Florida and in England, have been approved to be used in Israel. That the idea is the same thing to withhold the idea behind the change of the law. So if in Switzerland, for example, living wills exist, I assume you'll be able to apply to the court there in order to get your living will signed and activated in Israel, approved there, just like we did with the Floridian one and the British one.
Okay, in the interest of time, we're just going to pause those questions. We may have time at the end. You will get an email tomorrow to thank you for joining this call, and in that will be Tanya's email address, so you'll be able to write to her and follow up. Okay, so thank you, Tanya. From my personal point of view as an advisor to families, and I've encountered this, I think it obviously is a very emotional step, and it raises some very, 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 very tough questions for people to deal with. But managing wealth is not just about returns. You've got to manage the bureaucracy that comes. And I've seen within Pioneer, we've seen circumstances where people do not have this document and they get caught up in Israeli bureaucracy, and it takes forever. And the documents you have to prepare and the legal costs associated with working with the guardian authority in Israeli law, if you do it too late, there's a cost which is far greater than the cost of setting it up. And I've seen that happen. And just, ironically, we had a case where it took forever to resolve the legal environment. And by the time they resolved, the person passed away a week later after the bureaucracy was finalized. So it took a year and a half, 2 years to sort out. That can be avoided by setting this document, which is pretty, it's painful and it's emotional, but it's pretty, it's something worthwhile doing. Okay. So any further topics, questions on that, we're going to have to email. I'm going to switch over to email Tanya. I'm going to switch over to my presentation now. And we're going to go to the other spectrum of wealth management, which is markets and whatever. Okay, a quick election update. The market responded very favorably to Biden's victory or expected victory. The market was responding before the results were official. I'm calling that a relief rally. The market wants and likes a balance of power, and there were no big surprises. So we didn't see a Democratic clean sweep of the Senate, and we have a conventional centralist leader versus the erratic, contentious leader. So everyone's kind of breathing a sigh of relief, and some money is going back into the market, and appears quite a lot from Wednesday last week. And today in addition to that, we've got this announcement by Pfizer that they have a virus that is 90% effective. The timing of that is questionable, but it's still good news. The Senate is kind of undecided. I think in my mind, it is decided. It's currently 48-48 Republican Democrat, but there's 2 states outstanding. Each state has 2 seats in the Senate. Alaska is guaranteed Republican. So with Alaska, they get to 50. The Republicans have 50 seats, which means it's not a Democratic controlled or Democratic majority. And it doesn't matter really what happens in Georgia. It'll be aesthetically important, but not critically important to control of the Senate. So if the result is 50-50 or 51-49 or even 52-48, it's not a very strong majority for the Republicans. But from the market point of view, it's a balance of power. Trump is going to make a noise and he's going to go down fighting. I'm pretty sure that it's more bark than bite. And his refusal to accept defeat kind of makes it hard for the Republicans to move forward and to accept and to keep the Senate control. So the more noise Trump makes, the more we see the conservatives split and weakened. And I think that there's going to be Republicans who are going to distance themselves from Trump very, very, very quickly. 2022, will be another election for a third of the Senate. And interestingly, there are 6 states there which are regarded as swing states where Biden won. and which are up for re-election in 2 years' time. So if we don't get a Democratic-controlled Senate now, we will get, in my opinion, we will in 2 years' time have a Democratic-controlled Senate unless something significant happens. Virus update, as you know, I don't know who follows these numbers. We're currently at 550,000 cases per day. That's the moving 7-day average. In May, it was only 100,000 per day on a 7-day moving average basis. So we're 6 times as much. We've had some cases over, some days over 600,000. The mix is slightly different, meaning people vulnerable or elderly are taking more precautions, and they're a lower proportion of the infected cases. And younger, healthier people are a much higher proportion, and therefore the fatality or mortality rate has improved. We're currently at a 7-day moving average, which is similar to the peak of, on a global basis, of April. Obviously, it's going to increase, but it's not going to increase to the extent that the case count is. Public attitudes are changing. We're all feeling this. We're getting used to wearing a mask. We're getting used to the strange interaction of shaking hands with your elbow, etc., etc. Medical solutions are improving. And the vaccine, even though vaccine concerns exist, and it was regarded that there's not one vaccine, today Pfizer announced that there's a vaccine that's 90% effective, and that's obviously good news. And it seems to me the big risk now is not the virus itself, but a policy overreaction. And we have to ask, what is Biden going to do different? And is he going to impose any sort of shutdown? And in my opinion, he's not. He's going to do all the soft aesthetic stuff that Trump should have done. He's going to promote mask wearing. He's going to appoint a council of serious advisors. He's going to be more empathetic. Maybe there'll be certain areas within the USA which the federal side and the local state will work together. So all these soft things to try to control the virus, but I don't believe he's going to go the route of the UK or Europe in terms of a forced shutdown. I really don't believe that. So, because it's technically very difficult to do in America, and it's not what the public want. So it's a very challenging environment for any government to manage, but we have a spirit of optimism coming now. Let's just have a quick look what the market's done this year. The red line is NASDAQ. If you were invested in technology, you did fantastically this year, plus 30% in NASDAQ. That's being pushed by the big names that you know, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, Netflix. Those are the ones that are really pushed that up. The S&P 500 is only moderately positive. It's pushed up by those names. If you take out those names, you're actually in negative territory for the S&P 500. The green line, the next one down, is emerging markets. That's been pushed up by China. If you're in Brazil or India or Russia, bad. So China's pushed those numbers up. The bottom two is Europe, the Eurostoxx 50 and the Tel Aviv 125. You can see very clearly that Israel's in the same boat as Europe. They haven't had the rebound, the technology-driven rebound that the US market has had. This means that if you have a shekel portfolio, you're going to be probably in negative territory, well, on your equity component for sure, negative territory. But that kind of indicates where risk assets are, and an Israeli portfolio, a shekel-based portfolio, would have done worse this year than a global dollar-denominated portfolio. So that's just more or less where we are. I get this question all the time: why are markets so high? Market participants like myself, we have a long-term constructive view. We're not planning the portfolio for the economic crisis that we're in. We're thinking beyond it. There's an expectation of a huge amount of fiscal support. We've already had a lot of government support, but there's more coming, okay? We had to get through the election to do it. The Republicans now are unlikely to resist the spending. If you think back to Obama days and news headlines about debt ceilings in the US, Obama would go to the Senate and ask for more money, and the Republicans would fight him tooth and nail every step of the way. Now, who's going to resist a COVID recovery fiscal spend, right? So we're very optimistic. It's coming. It's just a question of how big is it going to be and when does it start? Is it going to be start before January or after January. Policy contribution. The first thing the Fed did was lower interest rates practically to the floor, and they started buying bonds to create stability in the market. That created excess liquidity. That excess liquidity made it to the equity markets, and that also pushed the markets up. What the result of that is equities have good value relative to bonds. And I'm going to show you in a minute a little bit more detail, but basically the conversation between an advisor and an investor all over the world is the same, okay? It doesn't matter if it's a small portfolio or a ginormous portfolio or a pension fund. It doesn't matter. Bonds, quality dollar-denominated bonds are giving low return. Therefore, you decide to move some of the money from bonds to equity. That provides equities with a push. And that's large amounts of money seeking returns. So from my own personal experience, I've seen it. There's a huge amount of cash out there just waiting for the confidence to invest. Good companies like Apple are seen as a store of value or protection in a world that's pretty scary. So people were buying Apple with the same mentality that people bought gold in the 1970s. Can markets go higher? In my opinion, yes, absolutely they can, and they will. What we're not 100% sure of is the timing. But the fundamental assumptions of investing and portfolio management are the same. We believe that the market will continue to go up over time. Part of that is inflation, part of that is growth, part of that is just simple dividends. Less now, more in the future. So the market is expecting a large relief bill. The number that's been thrown around is $800 billion. A number bigger than that will be good news for the market. A number smaller than that will be probably a negative surprise for the market, but it's an enormous number. Biden will likely have more support. As I said, the Republicans in the Senate are going to support a spending bill. And another thing that's happened, COVID has completely changed the attitude to government spending and debt. It's almost like the parents have left the room and the kids can go wild. The government debt almost doesn't matter in today's world. There's no way Japan, Europe, or the United States can repay their levels of debt in my lifetime for sure. There's just no way. There's only way out of this debt is inflation and economic growth. So they're going all in, and that's why the debt ceiling that Obama faced is less relevant. The Tea Party style fiscal conservative Republicans who believe that a government debt is just like personal debt that has to be repaid, those guys are dead. That language has disappeared. Everybody's now used to a world of excessive government debt. What it means for us is interest rates are going to stay low for longer, okay? And that gives extra tailwind to equity investing. So I mentioned the Senate. Yes, there's some bad things to come, okay? It's not all good. Typical Democratic sort of strategy is higher regulation, higher taxes. These are going to come in different industries, in different forms, and they will come and they will hurt those industries for sure. But given the overall strategy, I think it's bullish for equities. Okay, the challenge is bond. As I said, quality bonds are expensive. Their prices are high. That means the future yield that we're going to get, because those coupons are fixed, the future yield is low. Okay, and this is a big challenge for investors, particularly private clients who can't handle too much volatility in their wealth. Right? Bonds are a big part of asset management. They're typically a bigger part of the portfolio than equities. A balanced portfolio in Israel is sort of 80-20 or 70-30, 70 bonds, 30 equities. A balanced portfolio in dollar thinking, in American thinking, is typically 50-50, 50% bonds, 50% equity. So we need to find a solution for a big chunk of the portfolio that's going to give us low returns. So we need to think about either more risk or different risks, different types of risks in order to get the returns that we expect. Here is a graph which I've taken from another presentation, which graphically shows where the bond market is. Each of these bars represents the different types of bonds. On the left, we have the most conservative bonds, which are short-term treasuries. And on the right, we have high-yield junk bonds, okay? The blue column is where these yields were in September 2007. The turquoise is, or the one green is September 2012. And the green is September 2020. It's hardly changed over the last month or so. And you can just see the huge difference. In 2007, you were getting 4% on your short-term treasuries. Now you're getting 0.1. Moving towards the right, the two columns, second and third from the right, this is investment grade universe. This is typically where private client money is. Quality bonds that are not going to go bankrupt, they're going to pay you a coupon. 2007, we were getting 5.4 or 6%. We're now getting 1.1 or 1.9. Now that's not enough for most clients that I know. So either you readjust your expectations about your portfolio or you figure out with your advisor how to take the right type of risks which suit you. So that graphic just shows how serious, how low interest rates are and what that means for asset management. What about the dollar? The next most common question I get is, oh, isn't the dollar going to weaken? It probably will, but it's not something you can trade. And it's not something that you can really do much about in the short term. It's extremely difficult to time currencies correctly. You need to take a more strategic view on your currency allocation and be patient. If you're going to move money from one currency to another, you need to be very, very patient. I believe the dollar shekel rate today is 3.36, which is incredibly low. And in my opinion, it's even though it's coming off the back of a weak dollar, that's too strong for the shekel. So I think with a bit of patience, we'll get a more attractive rate to move dollars to shekels. But I certainly wouldn't be moving large amounts of dollars to shekels at this point. The dollar is still the reserve currency of the world, and there's a huge gap between who's coming next, okay? A lot of international transactions in dollars, a lot of governments around the world keep their reserves in the form of US treasuries. It's still the strongest currency in the world. The fact that they've issued tons of debt and their economy is not as strong as it used to be doesn't mean the dollar is going to weaken necessarily. Why? Because currencies are all relative one to the other. Europe is a disaster zone, in my opinion, and it's very difficult to see a meaningfully strong euro versus the dollar. Which other currency is going to come up? I believe that in the long term, China is going to close that gap to the US dollar, and therefore China needs to be in your portfolio in one shape or form. We have it in our portfolios, we're buying more. Some people ask me about Bitcoin and gold. Bitcoin, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you a lot more is talked about Bitcoin than actually done. Very, 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 very few people actually own Bitcoin. So I'm not sure how relevant it is. And it's still got a long way to go before it becomes any sort of serious economic force. The people who buy Bitcoin say that, yeah, they don't trust the banking system, they don't trust the governments. Well, that might be right, but it doesn't mean you necessarily have to buy something like Bitcoin. Gold, I'm not a huge believer in gold. The argument that gold is going to protect you from inflation, I think that's from the 70s and is not 100% reliable argument in today's world. While you hold gold, it's very volatile. It doesn't give you a coupon. It doesn't give you interest. It doesn't give you dividend. So I don't really see the argument of gold. If you're going to own gold because you believe that gold will be a store of value in an inflationary world or an excess government debt world, then you need to actually own a meaningful chunk, right? You can't own 2 or 3% of gold in your portfolio. You need 20, 30% of gold in your portfolio, which in my experience with private clients, no one has the stomach for that. So I don't believe that gold is the solution. What to do? All right, so always keep your eyes on the long term. I may come across in this call as optimistic. I am optimistic, but the market doesn't go up in straight lines, okay? Everybody knows that. We're going to have wobbles. Certain industries are going to have wobbles, and we need to be patient and disciplined in our portfolio management. I think that part of the solution about the low yielding quality bonds is to buy emerging market investment grade bonds. Yes, you can't swap 1 for 1, but maybe you'll swap 3 for 1 and get some yield out of emerging market. Chinese equities in the portfolio, I mentioned it before. For me, it's something you have to have. ESG, environmental, social, and governance. This is probably the biggest trend in the investment world. I think in a post-Trump world, the environmental theme is going to get an extra push. It's up. The one ETF we track, clean energy, is up like 6% today, something crazy. So I think that those type of themes, environmental, social, and governance themes, I really believe belong in a portfolio. And this is an expertise that Pioneer's been investing a lot of time and resources on. And we're going to be hosting a webinar on that pretty soon. So just keep a lookout for that, both in Hebrew and English. I think ESG is a very interesting place. Structured notes, there's a webinar that we hosted on structured notes, teaching you the basics of structured notes. You can find it on our YouTube channel. I like structured notes. I think they belong in the portfolio. You can get all sorts of structured notes. You can get complete junk, which we don't do, and you can get some really good structures. I believe in index linked, not single company linked. Within the structured note world, a lot of them get pushed aggressively by the industry because of conflicts of interest. Those of you who know Pioneer's model, we have no conflicts of interest. We're not allowed a commission on the note. So if we buy a note, we're buying it for purely professional reasons and not because someone's paying us a kickback. So within the structured note world, you can have risky ones, you can have moderate ones, you can have conservative ones. I think the conservative style structured notes are one of the solutions for the low yield and investment grade bonds. As I said, currency, be patient, manage your risk strategically, because we're in for a little bit of a ride on the dollar probably in the short term. The long term, it's anyone's guess. Okay, that's my bullet tour on the market wrap. Let's just have a look at the questions. I see they mainly... we have a question here. It seems you are still America-based. Will Israel return to its pre-COVID stability? Yes, I believe it will. Certainly in time. We're very, very cautious about over-levered companies because there's obviously going to be a cash crunch still to come. For those of you who know, we have a separate team within the professional team at Pioneer who manage shekel-based portfolios. And they have a very conservative strategy and they're keeping a close eye. And yes, the Israeli market, I believe, will recover. I don't think it's going to get the same type of tailwind that the NASDAQ got this year. But I do believe that in time it'll recover. It just needs a bit more time and a bit more solid economic numbers, because right now the numbers are pretty weak. Okay, if there are any other questions, I see, Tanya, there's another question for you. If you can just come off mute. What if you already have a POA in place and it is filed in the United States? Can you use a foreign living will in Israel?
Hey, Mike. As I said earlier, the courts have accepted foreign living wills in Israel since the change in the law. It depends where it's coming from. The USA is a big place. Each state in their own laws. We need to check. They've accepted Florida. That I can say.
All right. Okay. I think we've dealt with all the questions. And let's just check. Yeah. Great. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for the time. Thank you, Tanya. If you'll get Tanya's email tomorrow sent to you once you registered. If there are any other questions, please contact your Pioneer Relationship Manager, and stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Tanya.